Hi everyone, welcome to Belle's Books. I'm Carly. Today I'm doing a very belated wrap up of the books that I read in March and April, which doesn't seem to amount to much because I am reading lots of big books at the moment and I'm in the middle of a few of them. So the first book I finished in March, this feels like a very long time ago, was The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. I have done a separate review video of this for the Women's Prize long list because it was longlisted and now it has been shortlisted. So I will link that review down below. I did enjoy this book, but it wasn't the 5-star read I was expecting. I had very high expectations for this novel and I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the story. I thought it was very compelling. I did like the writing style, but as I've said in that review, I felt like it was a little bit overdone. It was a bit too much. The character of Ada, who is our protagonist, didn't really feel like a young girl to me. Some of the dialogue just didn't work. It didn't feel like she was a teenage girl. She's supposed to be 16 and it just didn't come across like that. I also didn't really gel with the fig tree narration part. And the more I've thought about that book as I've had time away from it, the more I've thought, yeah, I initially gave it a 4-star. I think I'm probably going to drop it down to a 3-star now that I've sat with it a little while. Like I said, I did enjoy the story about the dual timelines, which is something I always really enjoy. Ada's parents getting together in Cyprus. I really enjoyed finding out about the history of Cyprus, which I knew nothing about beforehand, so that was really interesting. Some fascinating facts about trees and the natural world, some of which I already did know before. But yeah, there was just some things that didn't work for me in that book, and I'm not sure it's going to stay with me. Like, yeah, I just don't think it's going to be one that I'm going to think about going forward. Anyway, take a look at that review. I'll drop it below. I am carrying on with reading as many of the Women's Prize shortlisted novels that I can, but I'm slow, as you probably know if you've been here before. I'm a slow reader. I'm still only halfway through This One Sky Day by Leone Ross, and so I'm carrying on with that. Anyway, let's talk about the other books I read. Now I read The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley because Katie over at Books and Things was doing a read-along. I think this was in March. Do you know what? I can't remember. So I thought, I've always wanted to read this. It's been on my shelf for absolutely years. I bought this years ago. And I'm trying this year to read, not get carried away with all the new releases. I'm trying to read some of the backlist books that I've got on my shelves. So this was a great opportunity to pick this up. I predicted this would be a 5-star read for me because it has everything that I enjoy. It is historical fiction. It's set in Victorian London. It has a bit of magic realism. These are all things I very much enjoy. However, this was such a surprise because I didn't like it. And I mean, I'll tell you why. Okay, so I didn't find the writing style particularly easy. Or on a sentence level, I found it quite clunky. And I know this book has a lot of love and Katie adores it. And so I was like sure I was going to love it. And then I was just getting to parts where I was like, wait, what? Reading the same sentence over again because it didn't read right to me. So on a sentence level, the writing just didn't work for me. I didn't like the characters, like any of them. Nathaniel is the protagonist and we meet him as he's a civil servant and he mysteriously comes across this pocket watch one day in his room where he lives and carries it around for a little while, and it sets off an alarm that means he leaves the building that he's in, and then that building explodes. There's a bomb that goes off. So the book is about him trying to find out who has set this bomb off. He's working with government officers, kind of like undercover, to work out who the bomber is, and he knows it's probably got something to do with this watch that saved him. And he meets the character of, I've even forgotten his name because it wasn't that memorable. Mori. He meets the character of Mori, who is a Japanese watchmaker. He lives on Filigree Street, and I just didn't care. I felt awful, but I just didn't care. I didn't like Mori. I get it when there's unlikable characters, but there was just nothing in this book that made me want to carry on reading. I should have DNF'd it, but I didn't. I very rarely DNF books, and I thought, no, I'm going to battle on with this. I'm going to crack on. Maybe there's something that will pull me through. And it was just a slog, and I really didn't like it. So the book follows Nathaniel and Mori's interactions, and Nathaniel trying to work out what's going on. There is a fun clockwork octopus. There are lots of like fun kind of magic clockwork things that Mori makes that are quite interesting, but there just wasn't enough. Yeah, it just wasn't enough to keep me interested. And like I say, I just didn't care about any of the characters. The plot I found slightly baffling. And I just feel bad that I didn't love this. But I was just like, meh, this is not the book I thought it was going to be. I am very sad about this. So I will not be reading the other books by Natasha Pulley, just because like her writing style just wasn't for me. I am very sad. Okay, then I listened on audiobook to The Good People by Hannah Kent. I didn't realise I had this physical copy. It's been on my shelf, so there you go. There's another one off my shelf, a backlist book that I've had for years, but it came up as I think it was like a March title from my library audiobook app. So I thought I'll listen to this because I thought Hannah Kent wrote about, again, magic realism, and this book I thought was going to be about fairies. It's set in Ireland. So we are following this woman, Nora Leahy, who is widowed early on in the book, and she is grieving for her husband. She's also caring for her grandson. Her daughter has passed away. She's caring for her grandson, who is clearly disabled, and he's got like no mobility. He can't walk, he can't talk, and she's struggling to look after him. She thinks that he is a changeling because of how he is, because when he was like younger, when he was 2, she saw him as a regular boy, and she saw him walking and talking, and he was quote normal, because that's what she saw him as. And then when her daughter died, her daughter's husband brings the child to Nora and her husband to look after, and he is in this state. So they think that he is a changeling, and the story follows Nora's attempts with the local like wise woman, healing woman who has the knowledge of the Fae world, to put the fairy out of this boy. Now, I was under the impression that this book was going to be magical. It was going to be about fairies. That's my jam. I love anything about the fairy world. What this book is actually about is this rural poverty, and this very rural way of living, and this belief that everybody had about what fairies could do to you. So the good people is a term for the fae folk, the fairies, in that they could curse you and they could put changelings in your house and make bad things happen. So the whole book is based on this story. Nora has a young girl that she gets in to help her, like to look after her grandson Mihal. One thing I will say about the audiobook is I really appreciated the audiobook for the Irish pronunciations, because I would not have known how to pronounce these things. So in the to see it written on the page, the child's name looks like Michael, but in the audiobook it was pronounced Mihal. And I did enjoy the audiobook of this, but there were so many points where I was going to DNF this book, because the more it became apparent that it was really not about fairies, it was about the people's belief in fairies and the way they lived their lives by it. But massive trigger warnings here for child abuse, because that's what happened when these people thought that fairies were involved, changelings were involved. They would do very, not nasty, but horrible things to these people to try and put the fairy out, and that effectively means torture. So there were so many points in this where I was like, I can't go on with this because it's horrendous. Because the actual thing is, this actually happened in Ireland. This is based on historic fact. At the end of the audiobook, it didn't read the author's note, which I was, so I've just read it just now. And it does say this is a work of fiction, but it takes inspiration from a true event in 1826, which I don't think I realised at the beginning. But the more it went on, I did kind of Google it and go, oh no, this was a real thing that happened. And this was, you know, this happened on multiple occasions, not just to a particular child, but to lots of different people. So it's grounded in fact. It's very disturbing. And should I have DNF'd it? Probably. I found it very upsetting to read. And it, like I say, it wasn't what I thought it was. I thought it was going to be about fairies and magic, and it wasn't. It was just very, very difficult and disturbing. Good things I enjoyed. I did enjoy the writing style. It's quite slow paced. I enjoyed the characters, although obviously some of them were very difficult and did some horrible things. There's commentary here on, you know, the way that people had to get by through being impoverished. I really enjoyed the descriptions of landscape and just like the day-to-dayness of what their houses look like. This is what I love about historical fiction, putting you in that moment, what their houses look like. They had rushes on the floor, how they lived, how they slept, what they ate. It was mostly potatoes. That's what I like about historical fiction, but this was too much fact and not enough magic for me. So again, I was disappointed with this, and yeah, it was a hard read. So I don't think I would read this again. Hannah Kent, I have got her other book, Burial Rites, and the new one, Devotion. So I will read those because I did, like I said, I enjoyed her writing style. I'm just hoping that those other books do actually have something magical in it and not torture and horrendousness. So, you know, we're not doing too well here. Okay, the one book I read in March, April, can't remember when I finished it, that I really adored was a non-fiction, and that was Wonderland by Jini Reddy. Is it Wonderland? Yes, Wonderland. As in wonder about the land. It was a non-fiction, and it was basically Jini Reddy is going about Britain and trying to find magic within the landscape. Now, this is something that I very much feel an affinity with, because I am always trying to, you know, feel that connection with the earth. It's something that I feel like we used to have when we were more attuned to living seasonally and living in harmony with the earth, that we don't have anymore. So her quest was to find this connection with the land that she's on, that she lives in, and it was various places that she would travel to around Britain. So she goes down to Cornwall to see like labyrinth or mazes, to find some kind of, it's like a spiritual connection. She goes up north to Scotland. She goes all about the place, and I really enjoy the travel writing, the descriptions of the natural world, especially because it's her experience, it's her like memoir. I really enjoyed this yearning that she had for this connection that sometimes just missed the mark, and sometimes it didn't happen, and sometimes she had experiences where she was in a place that just she felt nothing, or she felt uncomfortable because of who she was around. There was an instance where she goes to a commune and everyone pretty much ignores her and doesn't include her in what they're doing, and she just feels really uncomfortable. So I really appreciated that, because that's how it is sometimes, you know, when you read like nature writing from other people. Like, I really enjoyed Robert Macfarlane's writing. I think I read his book The Old Ways, I think that's what it was called, but I didn't connect with it as much as Jini's book, because it feels like I just didn't know enough. Like, he's talking about, he names everything, from trees and birds and places, and gives elaborate descriptions. But the way that Reddy writes is very much on a par with how I feel. I don't know the names of everything, like trees and plants. I've got an allotment, I do my best. But I still want this connection, this spiritual feeling, this like at oneness, if you want to get all hippie about it. And I just really appreciated what she was trying to do, and how she went about it. And sometimes there were real instances of, yes, there's something, yes, there's a connection, and she feels something. And I was really kind of hopeful by that, because it's something that I'm always striving to do. I just really loved it. I loved it so much. And I don't know what else she's written, but I'm going to be seeking it out. Would highly recommend. It's not a massive book. It was a library book, which is why I haven't got it here. But I adored it. I really, really would recommend it if you're up for some nature writing, some kind of spiritual yearning. And I tell you what, afterwards, I really wanted to read more stuff like that, but also that was giving me information about the natural world. So, tell you what I picked up that I'm really excited about. Finding the Mother Tree by Suzanne Simard. Uncovering the wisdom and intelligence of the forest. How awesome is this? I came across this in a magical bookshop in London that I went to, that I've now forgotten the name of. But it's awesome because it's got books and tarot cards and crystals and all sorts. It was pretty cool. So this just sounds exactly what I want. Also has pictures, yes please, about the magic of trees. So that is one I want to get to very soon. Actually, it's Springathon now, isn't it? So I might pick this up for Springathon. And Woodland Folk Tales of Britain and Ireland by Lisa Schneidel. Probably butchered that pronunciation. But I love folk tales, particularly about woodlands. So those off the back of Jini's book. Excellent. Okay, then lastly, the book I have just finished is a book I have read for my book club. And this is The First Woman by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi. This is quite a chunky book. Well, for me, it was 400 and odd pages. This is a coming of age story set in Uganda, and it begins in 1973, I think. So we follow Chirabo, although I think it's pronounced Chirabo because I've watched a couple of videos of the author talking about it and she pronounces it Chirabo, but it's written with a K, so I read it as Chirabo. And she is a young girl in this rural community in Uganda, living with her grandparents. And the book starts off with her having this experience where when she gets stressed or worried, she feels like herself is breaking in two and part of her flies out of her body. So she's like on the ceiling looking down at what's happening, and she can fly around her village, and she's like very disturbed because, you know, that's not normal behavior. So she goes to see the village witch Nasuta to ask her, like, help me stop flying out of my body because this is weird. And she also doesn't know who her mother is, so she wants to find out about her mother. So this book is a coming of age story about Chirabo growing up, being in her village, going to school, her relationships with her friends, falling out with her friends, and falling in love. It's quite slow paced, and it's about her quest to find her mother. Now, there was so much I really enjoyed about this book. Like I say, it was quite slow paced, and at some points I did feel like it could have been cut down. The writing was at points the writing was like really interesting. There was some great turns of phrase that I think were maybe like traditional Ugandan sayings. Oh, I really wanted to pull out an example for you, because there were some that just like made me absolutely lol. I love them so much. But other times I found like it was a bit like, come on, all right, yeah, what's the point of this? And there were some instances where it was like a description about something she's doing, and then it just the chapter ends, and I was like, wait, what, how is that important, or what does that pertain to? So I had mixed feelings about the writing style. I really enjoyed the coming of age story. I like that anyway, particularly when it's about a young girl growing up. And the thing that I loved probably the most was the description of the traditional African childhood, because I learned so much from this book. Again, I love it when I can learn about other cultures and things that I just wouldn't know otherwise. So there's a lot of description about traditional rural life in this village, and how the children are brought up by the community, how they know everyone, and that like there's a lot of description about food, and again like the way people lived. So I loved all of that. One thing I will say is that I wish there was a kind of like a glossary of terms, because all the way through this book she uses like African words that sometimes you can understand what they mean, because you can pick it up as like, okay, it must be an item of clothing, or it must be a food, but I wanted to know what it was, and I just didn't get that. And there were too many to stop and look it up every time. Like sometimes I'll be like, right, I'll look that up because I want to know, but there were so many that I was just like, if I stopped to look up everything, I would never finish this book. So I felt like it would have benefited from like a glossary of terms in the back. Elif Shafak did that in The Island of Missing Trees, and I found that really helpful. So that would have been good. And also in the back of my book there is like a cast of characters, so I'm like, well, that would have been good at the front and also to have a glossary in there, but it's just a minor thing. This book deals with some really big themes. So it's about growing up, girlhood, feminism, and what that feminism looks like, particularly in this cultural and this time frame. So this is a very patriarchal society. Men are very dominant. There is a clan culture, which again is something I knew nothing about, so I found that really interesting. And it looks at the ways that women resist being completely oppressed, and the ways that women bolster each other to support each other in terms of how they work it around that form of patriarchy. So within this culture, men can take many wives, and children are brought up in these kind of family communities where there are lots of wives, and they don't necessarily like know who their mother is, or they don't put much store by knowing who their mother is. It's just there's a group of mothers and they all raise all of the children. And the way that that's discussed, I think, is really great, because sometimes when Western cultures look at this kind of like family structure, they can be quite dismissive or derogatory about it, and say, well, that's terrible because look at how these women are treated. But actually the way that this family structure is portrayed is benefiting women, because there's two elderly characters in here, Chirabo's grandmother and Nasuta, the village witch, talk about how it actually helps women to raise families like that, and to lean on each other and to draw strength from each other, and the benefit that it has for the children in that family construct. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It also looks at the way women turn on each other because of these patriarchal structures in a bid to gain power or gain favour with the men that are in control. So it was very nuanced. I really enjoyed that. The way that it wasn't, you know, it was trying to portray a typical African rural upbringing, but it spoke about all the different angles of it, and I thought that was very interesting and clever. I really enjoyed that. Like I say, I learned so much from this book. The one thing I was slightly disappointed about was the fact that this book is called The First Woman, and in America I think it has a different title, something to do about a girl as a body of water or something. But in the beginning, when Chirabo starts to go to Nasuta to find out, like, to get her to stop flying around, Nasuta is talking about the original state, or the first woman, and she's talking about African folklore and myth, which again I really was fascinated by. I just wanted more of that. It comes at the beginning when Nasuta's trying to like inform Chirabo about the way that women are aligned with water, and that is from like creation stories where women are aligned with the sea and water because they're fluid and uncontrollable, also I guess because of like bodily functions, the fact that we menstruate, and it's that I've found really fascinating. But it's only touched on in the beginning, and Nasuta's talking about like the oppression of women and the oppression of the original state just kind of tails off as Chirabo gets older and we follow her on her journey. And I just wanted that to be brought back in a bit more. I felt like this is really great. I was fascinated by it, and then it just didn't come back. So I was kind of disappointed that that didn't make more of a central theme throughout the book. And like, so the title for me doesn't work. I guess with the American title probably does work a lot more, because there are instances where Chirabo comes back to, like, she goes to a stream and she wants to like not pay her respects, but kind of greet the deity of the water, the water goddess, but she feels too embarrassed because I think someone else is there. And I really liked that incident, but I just wanted more of that. The ending though is, I mean, that plot wise, the plot was really interesting, and I was engaged about this with this book. I wanted to find out what happened to her, but at the ending there's a really joyous scene, and that scene, I won't spoil it, but it's so lovely. And it does speak back to the idea of women drawing power from water and solidarity with each other. And I really enjoyed that scene. So I would highly recommend this book. I really enjoyed it. We read it because it was the winner of the Jack Prize in 2021. And my book club generally reads books that are have won a prize or award, no matter what that is. So I'm really glad that I've read this. Like I say, it was a bit of a mixed bag. I just wanted more of the folklore and the myth stuff. But I'm really glad I read this. I definitely balanced out the scales of you know, the bad and the traumatic with the good and the wonderful. So those are the books, not many, that I have read in March and April. The books that I am currently reading, I'll tell you why I haven't read much, is because I'm still halfway through this. I am not even halfway through Wreck by Tom de Freston. This is non-fiction about art and creativity and dealing with trauma. I'm reading this because I thought it would be helpful for the exhibition that I'm curating, and I have just started to read Companion Piece by Ali Smith because I love her, and also she was at the Cambridge Literary Festival, so I went to hear her speak about this, and I also went to her debut writers panel, which I will talk about in another video because I have a small book haul to share with you. So that is long enough. How are you all? Talk to me in the comments below. Have you read any of these? Were you also disturbed and off-put by these two books? If not, and if you enjoyed them, tell me the reasons you enjoyed them, please. As always, I would love to chat to you in the comments, so please do drop me a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. It would make my day. I've just got past 400 subscribers, which is a massive achievement for me. So thank you very much for all the new people that have arrived recently. I very much enjoy having you here and would like to talk to you. So do subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye everyone.